On the pitch-black, icy river, there were two nearly 70-year-old retired men who, it is said, completed an act in just 29 minutes. It could be called a perfect murder. The kind of plot you'd find in a dark, suspenseful crime novel, sinking the body, sinking the boat, erasing all traces. This scenario appeared in the official account of the Yizhuang murder case in Linyi, Shandong. To this day, this case remains unresolved. It has been more than 8 years since the case occurred, going through 2 first trials and 2 appeals. Now, these 2 elderly people, their hair completely white, are waiting for the 3rd first trial. Let me tell you the outrageous and tragic story behind all this. What exactly happened? Please support my 2 channels, News Focus and Shepherd's Perspective. In the previous period, both of my channels were heavily targeted by internet trolls, resulting in a significant loss of subscribers and poor viewership, which has greatly affected me in many ways. Both of these channels actually focus on current affairs and people's livelihoods, speaking up for ordinary citizens. So whether you donate, subscribe, like, or share the programs, it's all a form of support for me. The topics I discuss are all sensitive issues for the Chinese Communist Party, and they are being covered up by the CCP. But for China to change, these are truths that everyone must understand. Friends in mainland China can use the one-click VPN to watch. It's convenient and safe, and the CCP can never block it. One-click VPN was developed by Chinese-American tech elites in the United States. It doesn't require any technical knowledge or experience with VPNs. You just need to scan the QR code on the screen with your phone's camera, and you'll automatically be able to bypass the firewall. Additionally, this requires crowdfunding support from friends overseas, because it's free for our compatriots in mainland China. So for those of us overseas, if we contribute a little, this method of bypassing the firewall can continue. Supporting this project is helping to bring down the Great Firewall. Helping our compatriots in mainland China is an act of immense merit. The donation link is placed below each day's video, and it doesn't matter how much you donate, just give according to your ability. For every $2,000 raised, we can generate 100 firewall bypassing links, allowing thousands upon thousands of friends in China to access overseas content around the clock without interruption. On behalf of our compatriots in mainland China, I sincerely thank you all. Highlight 8. Truth Shepherd tells it like it is. Hello viewers and friends, welcome to News Highlights. I'm Li Muyang. Today is Sunday, March 29th, Eastern U.S. time, and March 30th, Asia Pacific time. On Monday, there's a village in Yinan County, Linyi City, Shandong. It's called Sujiazhuangzi Village. The Yi River flows gently along the edge of the village. Many villagers often go fishing in this river with nets. In the village, there is a pair of distant cousins, Su Jifeng and Su Xiaofeng. In 2017, Su Jifeng was already 67 years old. Before retiring, he was a doctor at the township health clinic and received a monthly pension of about 6,000 yuan. Su Xiaofeng was 68 years old and usually worked on the family farm, occasionally doing odd jobs. After these 2 old brothers retired, their biggest hobby in the village was they would go fishing together in the Yi River. They weren't doing it for money, just for fun. Elderly people just want to enjoy themselves. On November 2nd of that year, the peaceful village was suddenly stirred up. News came from the neighboring Yulin village that a 50-year-old villager, Su Qingchun, had suddenly gone missing. Su Qingchun was a strong and sturdy farmer. Usually he made a living by growing strawberries and fishing in the Yi River to sell the fish. To make fishing more convenient, he built a simple hut on the west bank of the river, where he kept his fishing nets and iron boat. Around 8 p.m. on November 1st, after having dinner, Su Qingchun went to the hut. He never returned home after that. 12 days later, on November 14th, Su Qingchun's body was found on the east bank of the Yi River. Was it discovered by his relatives? The scene was extremely gruesome and also very bizarre. The corpse's hands were tied behind his back with a black cloth rope. Each of his individual ankles was firmly tied to a heavy rectangular hollow brick. There was also a white nylon rope with a slipknot looped around his neck. The case broke out, and the police quickly filed a case and began investigating. They soon locked onto their targets. Their focus turned to Su Jifeng and Su Xiaofeng, a pair of cousins. On November 17th, The police, on suspicion of intentional homicide, took these two elderly men, both nearly 70 years old, into custody. They were placed under criminal detention. The account of the incident provided by the police and the prosecution seemed logically sound. It appeared to be quite complete. According to the first instance judgment at around 7:40 p.m. on November 1st, after having dinner, Su Jifeng and Su Xiaofeng went to the river to collect their fishing nets. Because they caught few fish, the two of them went to Su Qingchun's fish cages to catch fish, but were discovered and insulted by Su Qingchun. The two of them discussed teaching Su Qingchun a lesson. Su Xiaofeng rowed the boat next to Su Qingchun's boat. While Su Qingchun was off guard, Su Jifeng struck the back of his head hard with a wooden stick, causing fatal severe cranial and brain injuries. Afterwards, the two found hollow bricks to tie to the body. They sank it in deep water and also sank Su Qingchun's small iron boat. On August 31st, 2019, the Linyi Intermediate People's Court delivered its first instance verdict. It found the two guilty of intentional homicide. Su Jifeng was sentenced to death and Su Xiaofeng was sentenced to life imprisonment. However, according to the family members and defense lawyers, the official account contains elements that seriously defy common sense. First of all, what was the motive for the crime? Su Xiaofeng's son, Su Mingshuang, stated, as for his own father, after retiring, he received a monthly pension of 5,000 to 6,000 yuan. Fishing was just a hobby. How could he possibly have stolen fish from Su Qingchun's fish cages? Secondly, there was a huge disparity in physical strength between the two sides. The deceased, Su Qingchun, was over 50 years old, more than 1.7 meters tall, and had been fishing for years. He was young and strong. In contrast, the Su brothers were both nearly 70 years old. Su Xiaofeng even suffered from presbyopia. Therefore, the lawyer raised doubts about this. On the pitch-black river, it was already difficult for two small boats to meet and line up side by side. For an elderly man nearing 70 to deliver a fatal blow with a wooden stick to a strong man while standing on a rocking boat on the water, the difficulty of this is extremely high. The rocking of the boat would not only offset the force of the blow, but Su Qingchun would also have had plenty of time to defend himself, or even counterattack, not to mention that Su Qingchun had an even longer stick on his own boat. This case is really bizarre, and there's still a lot more to come, so don't go anywhere. First, let me recommend Red Sea Cucumber Health Gel. Quite a few viewers have given feedback, saying that while Red Sea Cucumber Health Gel is great, it's often out of stock, which is really inconvenient. Well, don't worry, there's a solution now. Red Sea Cucumber has launched a custom order service to ensure a stable supply. This way, it won't be out of stock anymore. For those who need long-term health maintenance, you might as well go for this subscription service. It's the best choice. Why is that? Not only can you enjoy a 15% discount, but there are also special offers. If you subscribe for 60 pieces, you'll receive a complimentary box of sea cucumber and honey ginseng slices with your Red Sea Cucumber Health Gel. The box I'm holding contains 30 pieces, so 2 boxes make 60 pieces. Just subscribe to 2 boxes. If you subscribe to a box of 30 pieces of ginseng and yellow sea cucumber slices, you'll receive a complimentary Korean sunscreen. All friends who subscribe will also receive an additional $10 voucher. It's even more cost-effective for friends in mainland China. If you subscribe for 60 pieces, in addition to receiving the complimentary Shenhuangmi kidney slices, you'll also get extra 6-year-old whole-sealed black ginseng. The more you buy, the more you get. Of course, whether you subscribe or not, as long as you purchase the Red Sea Cucumber Health Gel, you can use my discount code XWKD to enjoy a 15% discount. The core point of contention in this case is whether these two elderly people actually had the time to commit the crime. According to surveillance footage from the Gezhuba Bridge on the afternoon of the incident, the two of them spent 1 hour and 43 minutes in the water setting nets. In the evening, when they went back into the water to retrieve the nets, it took them 2 hours and 12 minutes. In other words, it took about 29 minutes longer at night than during the day. The prosecution argues that these extra 29 minutes were the time they used to commit the murder. Defense lawyer Feng Yangqiang pointed out, that retrieving the nets naturally takes more time than setting them. because you have to carefully remove the fish to avoid the fish fins tearing the fishing net. What's more, these are two elderly people with limited mobility and vision, operating at night. The lawyer questioned whether, in those extra 29 minutes, the two of them could have managed to steal the fish. Being discovered, both sides exchanged insults and chased each other by boat on the water. The two boats ended up side by side. Then there was the beating with wooden sticks to ensure death. Then, in the darkness of the woods, they found and carried heavy hollow bricks. Then tied up the bodies, then tied the hollow bricks, then sank the bodies into the boat, and finally drove the victim's boat several hundred meters away and sank it. Finally, the two returned to the original spot. All of these actions were supposedly completed within 29 minutes. Is that possible? In order to seek the truth, Su Jifeng's son, Su Mingshuang, personally went to the Yi River to conduct an experiment. He found that, as a young man, just pulling up the fishing net alone took more than 100 minutes. He said, "I'm a young man and just collecting the net took me more than 2 hours." But they were already 70 years old. It's almost impossible for them to pull up the net, commit murder, and sink the body all within 2 hours. In response, the police also conducted an investigative experiment. But their experiment was a bit questionable. They brought in two people unrelated to the case to simulate the process. So what conclusion did they reach? They claimed it took 20 minutes to cast the net, 20 minutes to pull it up, 28 minutes to row the boat along the route, and 20 seconds to sink the boat. Therefore, this was used to prove that the two of them had enough time to commit the crime. But this official experiment was met with strong opposition. Su Xiaofeng's appellate defense lawyer, He Zhijuan, pointed out that surveillance clearly showed the two elderly people took 1 hour and 43 minutes to cast the net during the day, while the police experiment only took 20 minutes. This indicates that the experimental data is seriously detached from reality and cannot be used as the basis for a verdict. Moreover, the police experiment was conducted during the day, and the person rowing the boat was a young professional fisherman. But the crime took place at night, and the person rowing was Su Xiaofeng, whose eyesight was failing and who didn't have as much experience. The lawyer also pointed out an even more outrageous issue. During the simulation, the police experimenters went straight to the location where the red bricks were stored. They didn't account for the time it would take to search for the hollow bricks in the dark, and the experiment also did not simulate the process of arguing, chasing, fighting, or tying up the body. Even with these shortcuts, the police experiment still took 28 minutes. If the possibility of this time frame is already extremely slim, then the lack of physical evidence and the contradictions in the case are even more baffling. First of all, the most crucial murder weapon, the so-called wooden stick, was never found by the police. Secondly, and crucially, there is also a Rashomon-like mystery regarding the time of death of the victim, Su Qingchun. According to the verdict from the first trial, based on the forensic doctor's assessment, the victim's stomach was full of food. There were identifiable pieces of meat, garlic sprouts, green peppers, and other components, so the time of death was inferred from this. It was estimated to be about 1 hour after the last meal, which just happens to coincide with the time the prosecution claims the two elderly people were on the river. It matches up. But here's the problem. Defense lawyer Feng Yangqiang discovered a fatal contradiction while reviewing the case files. The autopsy photos attached to the forensic report clearly indicate that the victim's stomach was empty. The written report says the stomach was full of food, but the photos are labeled as the stomach being empty. This is a complete contradiction. In response to the lawyer's questioning, the Shandong Provincial Procuratorate submitted a new document to the court before the second trial. The new evidence included an additional photo and explained that the previous labeling of the stomach as empty was a forensic error. It was actually the laryngeal cavity and trachea. But the lawyer stated that this belated new photo was still very blurry, making it impossible to see any pieces of meat, garlic sprouts, or green peppers inside, and it was even impossible to confirm whether the person in the photo was Su Qingchun. There were also many doubts surrounding the sunken boat that the police salvaged as evidence. Su Qingchun's father had testified that the small iron boat their family lost was about 2.5 meters long. There were protruding steel bars welded onto the sides of the boat. But the iron boat that the police salvaged as evidence was exactly 3 meters long. There were no steel bars welded on the sides of the boat, and there were wooden cross braces between the sides. The lawyer pointed out that this boat was fundamentally different in terms of length, side features, and oar characteristics. It was simply not the boat that Su Qingchun had lost. In his statement, Su Xiaofeng also mentioned that when the boat sank, both people were standing on the same side of the boat. One person grabbed one end of the boat, filled it with water, and then pushed the iron boat down into the water. However, Su Mingshuang found through practical testing that if two people stood on the same side of a boat in the river and tried to overturn another iron boat, their own boat would be at risk of capsizing first. As for the iron boat being overturned, it would only tilt upward and would not reach the point of filling with water and sinking at all. Since the physical evidence is so weak, can this case still be characterized? What is it based on then? 2 words, confessions, after Su Zhifeng and Su Xiaofeng were arrested. They did indeed make confessions of guilt. However, when the case went to trial for the first time, the 2 elderly men recanted their confessions in court, firmly insisting that they were wronged, and described in detail the scenes of being coerced into confessing under duress. Su Xiaofeng tearfully recounted in court. At that time, Liu Xing, the director of the Yunnan County Public Security Bureau, personally interrogated me. He said Liu Xing kicked me and slapped me. I spat out blood, and he said I was disgusting. Facing allegations of coerced confessions, the defense lawyer requested to review the police records. The police's response regarding the synchronized audio and video recordings from the initial interrogation at the police station was simply baffling. They claimed there was a power outage at the station at the time, so synchronized audio and video recording was not possible. In court, the lawyer immediately countered, if there was a power outage, then how did you manage to print out the written interrogation records using a computer? Regarding this, the public security authorities later issued a supplementary statement saying that a problem with the surveillance equipment circuitry caused the devices to shut down. They also claimed that the surveillance system and the printer were not on the same circuit. In the end, the court held that although there were no recordings for the first 2 interrogations, both individuals later made multiple complete confessions with synchronized audio and video recordings after entering the detention center. The court deemed the evidence to be legally obtained and used it as the basis for conviction. Even more absurd is that the only so-called direct evidence in this case is the testimony of a fellow inmate named Ba Chengfa, who was referred to as Yu Zhen's informant. When testifying, Ba Chengfa claimed that Su Zhifeng confessed to him in the detention center that he had committed murder. However, the lawyer discovered that Ba Chengfa's statement was signed by a police officer on his behalf, with the reason given that he was illiterate. But later, in the video interrogation, Ba Chengfa clearly signed his own name. When the lawyer pressed for details during the second trial, Ba Chengfa's responses were all, "I don't remember." Due to the many doubts in the case, in October 2022, after the first second instance trial, the Shandong Provincial High Court made a ruling. The original verdict was found to have unclear facts and insufficient evidence, so the criminal part of the original criminal and civil judgment was revoked and sent back to the Linyi Intermediate Court for retrial. Defense lawyer Zhong Ruoxin stated in a post that the civil part not being sent back for retrial means that in fact, the Shandong Provincial High Court recognized the establishment of the act of intentional homicide. Under such circumstances, it would be impossible for the Linyi Intermediate Court, in its retrial at first instance, to go against the effective ruling of the higher court and determine that the act of intentional homicide did not occur. As expected, in March 2025, the Linyi Intermediate Court issued a first instance verdict after the retrial. They still determined that the 2 were guilty of intentional homicide. The only change was that Su Zhifeng's death sentence was commuted to a suspended death sentence sparing his life, while Su Xiaofeng's sentence remained life imprisonment. At first glance, changing the sentence from death to a suspended death sentence seems like an act of mercy beyond the law, but the families and lawyers saw right through what was going on behind the scenes. The families pointed out that this way, both the Linyi Intermediate Court and the Shandong Provincial High Court could avoid having the Supreme Court review the death penalty in this case. Because according to the laws of the PRC, cases where the death penalty is to be carried out immediately must be reported to the Supreme Court for review. But for a suspended death sentence, it only needs to be approved by the Shandong Provincial High Court. Zhong Ruoxin bluntly pointed out that this is essentially a verdict that leaves room for maneuver. When judicial authorities are faced with major flaws, such as a broken chain of evidence or suspicions of coerced confessions, they neither dare to uphold the bottom line of innocent until proven guilty and declare the defendant not guilty, nor do they want to bear the responsibility and pressure of possibly releasing a criminal. So they choose to impose a lighter sentence as a way to blur the controversy over the conviction. Lawyer Zhong Ruoxin also cited the intentional homicide case of Zhang Man in Yunnan, which she once represented. By way of comparison, the Dali Intermediate Court at the time determined that Zhang Man had killed 4 people in a cruel manner, but citing the need to leave room for doubt, sentenced him to life imprisonment. Zhang Man was wrongfully imprisoned and was not declared innocent until 28 years later. Lawyer Zhong harshly criticized this. Such verdicts that leave room for doubt may appear prudent, but in reality, they show a disregard for human rights and a betrayal of the rule of law. Faced with various issues during the retrial of the first instance, the defense lawyer team even adopted the very rare strategy of silent defense during the court hearings in May and September 2024. The lawyers believed that the court ignored the defense's motions for recusal, jurisdictional challenges, and exclusion of illegal evidence. They turned a blind eye, and the trial became a mere formality. The lawyers made it clear to the court that given the circumstances, the court was completely devoid of fairness and the trial was just a procedural show. The defense would no longer present any opinions on the evidence or make any further defense arguments. The families of the 2 elderly people firmly supported the lawyer's decision. Su Xiaofeng even loudly declared in court that the case should be transferred out of Linyi and that they would not speak to those responsible for creating this wrongful case. Now, speaking of this, we have to mention the public security, prosecution, and court personnel involved in handling this case. The reason this case has attracted so much attention, aside from the numerous absurdities and suspicious points in the case itself, it's also because this team of case handlers is notorious in Linyi. Prosecutor Zhu Xuezhen was also the prosecutor in the nationally sensational Zhang Jichao case. Back then, 15-year-old middle school student Zhang Jichao was accused of raping and murdering a female classmate, despite there being no physical evidence at all. And with the timeline not matching up, Zhang Jichao was sentenced to life imprisonment solely based on confessions extracted through torture. It was not until nearly 15 years of imprisonment that Zhang Jichao was acquitted and released, but to this day, the real culprit has still not been found. In Zhang Jichao's case, 4 classmates testified for him, stating that Zhang Jichao participated in morning exercises and had no time to commit the crime. However, all 4 of these testimonies were deliberately concealed. The presiding judge of the first trial of this case, his name is Chen Gang, and he once presided over another famous wrongful conviction case in Linyi, the Ren Yanhong case. A rural woman, Ren Yanhong, was accused of poisoning and wiping out an entire family and was twice sentenced to death with reprieve. The cause, surprisingly, was that the Linyi police found a fortune teller who calculated that she was the murderer. After being imprisoned for 8 years, Ren Yanhong was declared innocent and released. In Ren Yanhong's case, Chen Gang wrote in the verdict that the possibility of forced confessions through torture could be ruled out. This is exactly the same logic he used in his verdict on the Su brothers in this case. The families of the Su brothers angrily stated that the Linyi Intermediate Court and Procuratorate had previously mishandled major wrongful cases such as the Ren Yanhong case and the Zhang Jichao case, and this case is just another example of them fabricating wrongful convictions. In a healthy rule of law society, everyone knows that judicial personnel who create major wrongful cases, they should be held accountable. However, under the CCP's system, not only are they not held accountable, some have even been promoted. Chen Gang was promoted from deputy director to presiding judge. This exposes a frightening institutional problem. under a performance-driven system that blindly pursues case closure rates. Within a bureaucratic machine that lacks transparency, fabricating wrongful convictions has even become a stepping stone for some people to get promoted and make a fortune. In the case of the Su brothers, the main person in charge was originally from the Criminal Investigation Brigade of the Yunnan County Public Security Bureau. The instructor, Wang Chenggang, was later also promoted all the way up and became the head of the Economic Investigation Brigade. However, in March 2025, the Linyi Municipal Commission for Discipline Inspection and Supervision announced that Wang Chenggang was under disciplinary review and supervisory investigation, but the authorities did not disclose the real reason for his downfall. Back then, during the interrogation, Su Xiaofeng was accused of being slapped in the face. Liu Xing, the former director of the Yunnan County Public Security Bureau who kicked people, was transferred to serve as the director of the Hedong branch of the Linyi Public Security Bureau. In 2020, he was expelled from the party and dismissed from public office for serious violations of discipline and law. According to public information, not only did he engage in embezzlement and bribery, but his lover, a female auxiliary police officer who was 24 years younger than him, even helped him collect a bribe of 500,000 yuan. With public security and judicial personnel like this, it would be laughable if they didn't produce wrongful convictions. That would be the real joke. But under the rule of the Chinese Communist Party, this kind of situation is everywhere. Let's get back to the case of the Su brothers. If Su Jifeng and Su Xiaofeng, these two brothers, are not the murderers, then who is the real killer of Su Qingchun? In fact, there were other leads in the case files, but the judicial personnel simply did not pursue them. Su Qingchun's wife, Wang Shuping, once recalled that about 10 days before the incident, someone was electro-fishing in the fishing maze set up by Su Qingchun and was stopped by him. In the summer of 2017, the fishing nets at Su Qingchun's home were slashed by someone. In the lunar calendar of the same year in July, Su Qingchun's large boat was even abandoned by someone on the river north of the bridge, with many stones piled on the boat, and one end had already sunk into the water. All these clues point to a problem. They show that Su Qingchun, who fished by the river all year round, had already gotten into conflicts of interest with others. He may have even made enemies. If these clues were thoroughly investigated and followed up, the real culprit might have been found. However, doing so would have taken the police too much time. Maybe the police thought it was just too much trouble. And it would also make people think the police were too incompetent for failing to notice such obvious issues. So the prosecution responded by saying they had no other leads on a different suspect. In order to find the truth, the Su family even publicly offered a reward of 500,000 yuan to search for the real culprit. On December 2, 2025, the Shandong Provincial High Court made a second ruling, stating that the Linyi Intermediate Court's verdict deprived the parties of their legal litigation rights, and once again overturned the Linyi Intermediate Court's decision. The case was sent back for retrial. After more than 8 years of twists and turns, this case has returned to square one. The two retired elderly people who once enjoyed their later years in peace at Yihebian. Now one is 75 years old and the other is 76. Yet both of them, frail and plagued by illness, are still being held in the detention center, their lives now in their twilight years. So is this really a hidden and brutal murder case? Or is it the original case full of loopholes that was forcibly closed? Where is the missing wooden stick? What is hidden behind the blackout in the surveillance footage? Why did the forensic report of an empty stomach suddenly become one full of food? And in those extra 29 minutes, could two elderly people in their 70s really carry out a series of difficult actions like murder and disposing of a body? I think not just me, but everyone probably already has the answer in their hearts. The judicial machinery of the Chinese Communist Party is still turning coldly. Will these two elderly people be able to walk out of the detention center alive? I remain skeptical. All I know is that as long as the CCP's dark regime continues under its tyrannical rule, there will inevitably be more wrongful convictions and fabricated cases. All right, that's all I wanted to share with you today. Once again, I'd like to remind everyone that Shen Yun is currently touring around the world. Don't miss the performances happening near you. The shows in New York are currently underway. If you haven't bought your tickets yet, you can use my promo code to purchase tickets on the official Shen Yun website. My 2026 will help you save a few dollars on service fees. Friends in North America can all use this promo code, My2026. Highlights, uncovering the truth, Shepard tells it like it is. See you again tomorrow, dear viewers.